I'm 39, my husband is 31, and right now, I feel like I'm drowning in my own life. We've been married for 2 years, but sometimes it feels like I've aged a decade since the wedding. We have a 17-month-old baby, a bright, beautiful little soul, but the truth is, motherhood has taken everything out of me in ways I never could have imagined. The birth was brutal, complicated. It left me with physical scars, but also invisible ones. My recovery wasn't simple or quick. I've always had an autoimmune disease, something that used to feel manageable before pregnancy. But now it's like my body has turned against me. Chronic fatigue, headaches, muscle and joint pain, digestive issues, you name it. Every day feels like I'm fighting through mud just to get through basic tasks. Still, I try to keep going because I have to. My husband works full-time outside the house. He's good at his job and usually brings home enough to keep us afloat, but he's gone most of the day. Meanwhile, I have my own full-time job, a 40-hour-a-week remote position. It's not one of those relaxed remote gigs either. It's performance-based, metrics-driven, where every number matters. If I don't hit my daily targets, it's obvious. And I can't afford to lose it. Not after the last year we've had. Because the truth is, the last year has been hard. Really hard. My husband went through 2 rounds of unemployment. Neither one was his fault, but those months nearly broke us. Emotionally, financially, it felt like we were constantly holding our breath. My paycheck became the only reliable income, and I had to keep it together no matter how bad I felt physically. There was no time to collapse. No time to rest. I was the net holding our family up. And now, even though he's back at work and things are better on paper, I still feel like I'm barely surviving. My days start before sunrise. The baby usually wakes around 6 a.m., sometimes earlier. I get her changed, fed, dressed, and settled for the morning. While she plays, I try to get through my first few hours of work, answering emails, finishing tasks, trying to sound alert and capable on calls, even though I'm often running on less than 5 hours of sleep. Between nap times, diaper changes, and snack times, I'm switching between employee mode and mom mode constantly. It's like living 2 full-time lives at once. We don't do daycare. We can't afford it, and even if we could, I'm too nervous about her getting sick constantly because of my weakened immune system. So I make it work, somehow. I've learned to type while balancing her on my hip, to finish reports during her naps, and to take conference calls with cartoons playing quietly in the background. And when my husband comes home in the evening, I'm running on fumes. I usually try to have dinner ready, or at least started, because he's been at work all day, and I feel guilty if I don't. He often helps clean up afterward, and I do appreciate that. But by then, my energy is gone. My body aches. I just want to lie down and stop existing for a little while. That's when the tension usually starts. He'll come sit next to me, maybe reach for my hand or try to cuddle, and I know what he wants. To connect, to talk, to feel close again. And I wish I could give him that, but instead I just freeze. My body feels heavy, my brain foggy. I don't have the energy to chat, to flirt, to be warm and soft. I know he feels the distance. I can see it in his face. A few nights ago, he finally said it outright. He told me he feels like I'm neglecting him, not just sexually, but emotionally too. That I'm closed off, that I barely touch him anymore. That even when we do talk, I feel far away. I tried to explain that I'm exhausted, that my days are nonstop, that I'm doing 2 jobs at once while also trying to live in this body that doesn't cooperate anymore. But he said, I work hard too. I want to come home to an affectionate wife. That one hit me hard. Because he's not wrong, he does work hard. But the way he said it made me feel like I'm failing some invisible test, like I'm being measured against a version of myself I can't get back to. The woman who used to have energy, who used to laugh more, who used to reach out first, I miss her too. I wanted to tell him that I still love him, that I'm still here, but the person he wants is buried under exhaustion and pain. I told him I'm trying, that I really am. But he looked at me with that same tired disappointment that I've seen before, and I knew he didn't fully understand. Now, every day feels like walking on a tightrope. I'm constantly worried that if I don't push myself harder, if I don't smile more, talk more, touch more, he's going to slip further away. But at the same time, pushing myself means I break down faster. I'm already running on empty. Sometimes I think he believes I'm choosing to be distant, as if I'm withholding affection out of spite or laziness. But it's not like that at all. It's not a choice. It's my body's shutdown mode. It's how I survive the constant drain. And the saddest part? I do miss him. I miss us. I miss when things felt light and easy, when we'd stay up late talking or just lying close together. But back then, I wasn't in pain every day. I wasn't trying to juggle everything all at once. Now, when he reaches for me, I flinch, not because I don't love him, but because I know that if I let myself relax into that moment, I'll fall apart completely. The night after that conversation, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he'd said and every word I couldn't find the energy to say. I felt torn between guilt and resentment, guilty because I knew he was lonely, and resentful because I felt unseen. How could he not see how much I was giving? How could he look at me, a woman running herself ragged between work, motherhood, and illness, and still think the problem was that I wasn't affectionate enough? But then I thought about him too. How he's been carrying his own kind of weight. The job losses hit him hard. He's proud, ambitious, and being out of work twice made him feel like a failure. He doesn't say it, but I could see it in his posture, in the way he'd avoid talking about job interviews, in the nights he stayed up scrolling on his phone in silence. And maybe I haven't been there for him the way he needed either. Maybe we're both drowning in our own versions of exhaustion. The next morning, I decided I'd try harder. I told myself I'd put more effort into showing affection, small things like touching his shoulder when he walks by, asking about his day, smiling more. It sounded simple enough, but by mid-afternoon I was back in survival mode. The baby had a rough day, teething, fussy, refusing to nap. I had a team meeting that ran late, then a deadline I almost missed because my internet cut out. By the time I logged off work, the house looked like a tornado had passed through. Toys everywhere, laundry piled up, and dinner was still a mystery. When my husband came home, I was standing in the kitchen trying not to cry over a pot of boiling pasta. He could tell something was off, so he offered to take over cooking. I said no, it wasn't about the food. It was about everything. I felt like if I let him do one more thing, it would prove that I was falling apart. He hugged me from behind, kissed my shoulder, and whispered, "You don't have to do everything yourself." And for a second, I almost broke down right there. But instead, I just nodded and said, "I'm fine." That's the lie I keep repeating. I'm fine. After dinner, he started playing with the baby while I cleaned up. Watching them together should have made me happy, it usually does. But instead, I just felt this pang of envy. He gets to come home and be the fun parent. I'm the one who manages the schedules, the meals, the mess, the exhaustion. I'm the one who never gets to clock out. Later that night, when the baby was asleep, he came to sit next to me on the couch. I could tell he wanted to talk. He asked if we could plan a date night soon, maybe just a few hours out, dinner, a walk, anything to reconnect. I told him I'd think about it, but I could already feel my anxiety rising. The logistics alone, finding a babysitter, using energy I don't have, felt overwhelming. He sighed and said quietly, "You always say no." That hurt. Because it's true. I do say no. Not because I want to push him away, but because I'm terrified of collapsing in public, of ruining a night out by being too tired or in too much pain to enjoy it. I wanted to tell him all that, but I just didn't have the words. Instead, I stared at the TV, pretending to be absorbed in a show I wasn't even watching. The silence between us stretched thin. A few days later, we had another argument, this time about something small, stupid even. He came home frustrated from work and asked me why the house looked messy again. I snapped and said, "Because I'm one person doing 3 jobs, that's why." It escalated quickly. I said things I didn't mean, and so did he. He told me he feels like I've given up on us, that I don't even try anymore. I told him I'm too tired to try for a man who doesn't see what I'm already doing. It ended with him walking out to the porch for air, and me crying quietly in the baby's room. I don't even remember the last time we laughed together. That night, as I rocked the baby back to sleep, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror across the room. My eyes looked hollow, my face pale. My hair was tied up in a messy bun that's been my default for months. I didn't even recognize myself. This wasn't how I imagined marriage. I thought we'd be a team, two people building something together, not tallying who's giving more or who's too tired to touch the other. But lately, it feels like we're on opposite sides of a wall, both knocking but neither able to hear the other clearly. I know he misses the old me, the version who used to laugh at his jokes, who used to surprise him with hugs or texts in the middle of the day. And I miss her too. I miss being that woman. I miss having energy left over for love. But I can't find my way back to her right now. Every ounce of strength I have goes into surviving the day. Sometimes I wonder if he regrets marrying me. If in some corner of his heart, he wishes he'd chosen someone simpler, someone easier, someone who doesn't carry the weight of chronic illness and endless fatigue. He tells me that's not true, that he loves me, but I see the longing in his eyes when he talks about how things used to be. The scariest part is, I don't know how to fix this, because love alone doesn't refill your energy tank. It doesn't cure exhaustion or pain or depression. It doesn't make you suddenly want to touch and talk when your brain is screaming for silence. And I think that's what he doesn't understand. He sees affection as a sign of love. But for me right now, survival is my sign of love. The fact that I get up every morning and keep going despite everything, that's my love language. But it's invisible to him. He can't feel it the way I feel it. So we're stuck. Two people who love each other deeply, both feeling unseen. After that argument, there was this quiet shift in the air between us. Not explosive, not dramatic, just a cold distance that settled like fog. We still talked, of course. We still coordinated baby things, bills, schedules, dinner plans. But there was something missing in the in-between moments. The small touches, the lingering glances, the effortless laughter. He started spending more time in his home office after work, saying he needed to catch up on a few things. I knew what that meant. He needed space. And honestly, I needed it too. The silence between us started to feel like a shield. Some nights, after I put the baby down, I'd walk past his office and hear the soft sound of videos playing on his computer. Sometimes I'd peek in and see him scrolling on his phone, his face dimly lit by the screen. And for a split second, I'd want to go in to sit beside him to say, "Can we try again?" But then the thought of trying, of finding the energy to hold a conversation, to risk another misunderstanding, felt too heavy. So I'd just keep walking. It's not that I stopped loving him. It's that love started to feel like something I couldn't afford to feel deeply right now. Every ounce of emotional energy was already spent. I noticed little changes in him too. He'd still kiss me goodbye before work, but it was quick, almost mechanical. When he'd text during the day, it was mostly about logistics, groceries, baby supplies, appointments. The sweet, playful messages we used to exchange were gone. One night, after another long day, he came into the bedroom and just looked at me for a while. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, rubbing my knees because they'd been aching all day. He said softly, "You're so far away from me lately." I didn't even know what to say. I wanted to scream. "I'm not far, I'm right here. I'm just buried under all of this." But the words caught in my throat. I managed a quiet, "I'm tired." He nodded, but I could tell he was disappointed. He sat down beside me and said, "I miss us," and I knew exactly what he meant. But I didn't know how to give him what he was missing. I lay down next to him and he reached for my hand. I let him hold it, and for a brief moment, it felt like maybe we were finding our way back. But when he leaned closer, I froze again. My body stiffened, and I saw the hurt flash across his face before he pulled away. He didn't say anything, but the silence said enough. That night, after he fell asleep, I cried quietly into my pillow. Not because I didn't love him, but because I hated what I'd become. I used to be affectionate, warm, even playful. Now I felt like a ghost of that woman. The illness, the exhaustion, the constant demands, they've stripped away everything that used to make me me. I thought about therapy. I even looked up a few counselors online, but every option seemed impossible. Who would watch the baby? How could I fit it into my schedule? And how could we afford it when every dollar already had a destination? Still, I started reading articles about postpartum fatigue, autoimmune flares, the mental toll of invisible illness. For the first time, I started to understand that what I was feeling wasn't weakness. It was depletion. My body and mind were screaming for rest, but life didn't allow it. I showed one of those articles to my husband. He skimmed it, then looked up and said, "Yeah, I get that you're tired. I just don't know how long we can keep living like this." That broke something inside me. Because like this is all I have right now. There isn't a magic version of me waiting to wake up one morning full of energy and affection. There's just this version, the one doing her best to hold everything together with duct tape and determination. I didn't say any of that out loud. I just nodded and said, "I know." A few days later, my mom called to check in. She lives in another state, and she's been worried about me ever since the baby was born. I didn't plan to tell her much, but as soon as she asked how I was, I broke down crying. I told her everything, the exhaustion, the fights, the loneliness. She listened quietly, then said, "Sweetheart, you can't pour from an empty cup." That sentence has been echoing in my head ever since, because that's exactly what I've been doing. Pouring and pouring until there's nothing left. For the baby, for work, for the house, for him. And when he asks for more affection, more time, more me, I panic because there's simply nothing left to give. Later that evening, I told my husband about that conversation. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then said, "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I just want to feel like we're in this together again. I wanted that too." So we tried something small. That weekend, we agreed to have a quiet, at-home date night after the baby went to sleep. No phones, no work talk, just us. I even managed to put on a dress that wasn't covered in baby food stains. We ordered takeout and opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving. For the first hour, it felt nice. Like maybe the old us was still in there somewhere. But then I started getting a headache. One of those deep, throbbing ones that makes your whole body ache. I tried to hide it, but eventually he noticed. "You're in pain again, aren't you?" he asked. I nodded, and that's when I saw it, the flicker of defeat in his eyes. Not anger this time. Just exhaustion. The same kind I feel. He sighed and said, "Maybe we should just go to bed." We cleaned up in silence, both pretending we weren't disappointed. But as I lay next to him that night, I realized something painful but true. Love isn't always enough to bridge the gap between understanding and reality. He loves me, but he can't feel what it's like to live in this body. And I love him, but I can't meet him in the world of energy and spontaneity he longs for. We're both hurting, but in completely different languages. The next few weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Not quite peace, not quite tension, just this uneasy middle ground where we both tried to act like things were normal. We still shared meals, talked about the baby, laughed occasionally. But there was a quiet awareness between us, a constant undercurrent of something unresolved. It's strange how silence can be louder than shouting. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. There was a mix of concern and sadness in his eyes, and that look made me ache in ways I can't explain. Because I knew he still loved me, and I still loved him. But love didn't fix the cracks that kept widening between us. The nights were the hardest. That's when everything I'd been pushing down all day would rise to the surface, the guilt, the loneliness, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. I'd lie there in the dark, listening to the baby monitor hum softly, feeling like the world was resting on my chest. One night, after a particularly rough day where everything went wrong, the baby was fussy. My work software crashed twice, and my body felt like it was made of cement. I finally broke. When my husband got home, I was sitting on the floor in the kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and half-prepared food. The baby was crying in her playpen, and I was just done. He walked in, took one look at me, and froze. I didn't say anything at first. I just started crying, deep, ugly sobs that wouldn't stop. He rushed over, pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in months, I didn't push him away. I just let myself cry against his chest. Between sobs, I said, "I can't do this anymore." He held me tighter. "Do what, baby?" "Everything," I whispered. The work, the house, the baby, trying to be everything to everyone. "I'm so tired. I feel like I'm disappearing." For a long time, he didn't say anything, just held me. And for the first time, I felt like he really saw me. Not as the woman who used to be affectionate and energetic. Not as the mother who gets everything done, but as a human being who was breaking. When I finally calmed down, he kissed the top of my head and said, "We'll figure this out. Together." I wanted to believe him. Over the next few days, something shifted. He started helping more without me having to ask. He took over bedtime duty with the baby a few nights in a row so I could shower in peace or just sit quietly for 20 minutes. He started making breakfast before work and leaving me coffee already brewed. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I noticed that when he took small things off my plate, I actually had tiny flickers of energy left. Enough to sit next to him on the couch and ask about his day. Enough to rest my head on his shoulder while we watched TV. It wasn't much, but to him it seemed to mean everything. He told me one night, "I just needed to feel close to you again. Even if it's just this." That's when it hit me he didn't need grand gestures. He just needed connection. The kind that says, "I still see you." For the first time in months, I felt hope. But healing isn't linear. There were still bad days. Days when my joints flared so badly I could barely move. Days when the baby refused to nap, and I had to work through tears of frustration. Days when my husband would reach for me, and I'd still freeze not out of rejection, but out of fear that if I opened the door too wide, the flood of guilt and exhaustion would drown me. And those days made me wonder if maybe love really does have limits. One evening, after the baby finally fell asleep, we sat in silence for a while. The TV played softly in the background, but neither of us was really watching. He finally said, "Do you think we're happy?" It was such a simple question, but it hit like a punch. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know what the truth was. I thought about the early days, how we used to stay up late talking about our dreams, how we couldn't keep our hands off each other, how we thought nothing could shake us. And then I looked at where we were now, two exhausted people trying to love each other through survival mode. Finally, I said, "I think we're trying to be." He nodded slowly, his eyes sad. "I just miss feeling wanted." That sentence stayed with me for days. Because even though I was the one struggling physically, emotionally, mentally, I realized he was starving in his own way too. He wanted to feel seen, needed, desired. And maybe I'd stopped giving him that because I felt like I had nothing left to give. But maybe that's where we'd both gone wrong. We kept waiting for the other person to fill the gap, when what we really needed was to start rebuilding the bridge from both sides. The next morning, I did something small but different. When he kissed me goodbye, instead of the usual distracted, "Have a good day," I held onto his hand a little longer and said, "I love you." It felt awkward at first, like saying it out loud after all this time made me vulnerable again. But he smiled, and it wasn't the polite kind of smile. It was real. That small moment carried us through the week. I started to notice how even a few small gestures changed the atmosphere between us. A text during the day saying, "Thinking of you." Sitting next to him instead of scrolling on my phone. Letting myself laugh again when he made dumb jokes. And slowly something inside me started to thaw. It didn't mean my illness went away. It didn't mean I suddenly had energy or that our problems disappeared. But it reminded me that love isn't always this big cinematic thing. Sometimes it's survival, and sometimes it's choosing to reach out even when you're tired. Because as hard as it's been, I realized something. I don't want to lose him. Not because of fatigue. Not because of pain. Not because I forgot how to show love. I just need to learn how to love differently now. The changes we started making weren't dramatic, but they were real. Tiny moments that started to rebuild a sense of us. Some days, it felt like we were learning to be married all over again, this time with fewer illusions, more honesty, and a lot more grace, but it wasn't always smooth. The truth is, love after exhaustion feels different. It's slower, quieter, less about sparks and more about survival, patience, and understanding. I began to notice how the world doesn't prepare couples for this part. The part after the fairy tale, after the vows, after the first baby, when real life steps in and tests everything you thought you knew about love. I think back to when I first met him. I was drawn to his energy, his confidence, his easy laugh, the way he could make any space feel lighter. I used to mirror that energy. Now I'm the opposite, grounded, quiet, cautious. Maybe too cautious. Sometimes I wonder if he misses the person I was because she made him feel more alive, but I can't be her right now. I'm different. Life changed me. There was a moment last week that stuck with me. We were both in the kitchen, tired after putting the baby to bed. I was leaning against the counter, sipping tea, and he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I froze for half a second, old habit, but then I let myself relax into the moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't think about my to-do list or my pain or how tired I was. I just stood there letting myself be held. He whispered, "I've missed this." And I whispered back, "Me too." We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't some cinematic breakthrough, but it was connection, and that felt like progress. Later that night, while he slept, I sat awake and thought about how much of myself I've lost over the past year and a half. Not just as a wife, but as a person. Somewhere between motherhood, illness, and survival, I stopped tending to the parts of me that made me me. I stopped doing things that filled me up. I used to write. I used to take walks in the park just to feel the sun. I used to dance while cooking dinner. I used to laugh easily. But now, everything feels like effort. So I decided to make a quiet promise to myself. I was going to start finding small ways to come back to life. Not for him. Not for the baby. For me. The next morning, I woke up a little earlier than usual and sat by the window with my coffee. The world was still quiet. It was the first time in a long while I'd let myself just sit. No laptop, no baby monitor, no noise. Just breathing. When my husband came out of the bedroom, he looked surprised. "You're up early," I smiled. "Yeah, just needed a minute." He nodded, poured himself coffee, and joined me. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, watching the sun rise. And I realized that maybe these small, unspoken moments, is what love starts to look like when everything else feels too heavy. Later that week, I brought up the idea of couples therapy again. I expected him to hesitate, but instead he said, "If it helps us understand each other better, I'm in." That felt huge. It made me realize how much he still wants to fight for us. Even if he doesn't always know how, we haven't started yet. But just having that conversation took a weight off my chest. For once, I felt like we were standing side by side instead of on opposite sides of a problem. Still, some nights the old patterns creep back in. The exhaustion. The distance. The quiet. The other night, I told him, "I don't want you to feel unloved just because I'm tired." He looked at me for a long time before saying, "And I don't want you to feel like love is another thing on your to-do list." That line hit me like a revelation. Because that's exactly what it had become. Another obligation. Something I had to schedule around the chaos. But love shouldn't feel like a task. It should feel like a choice. A soft place to land. Since that talk, we've started carving out a new kind of rhythm. We plan quiet date nights at home. We share chores more equally. He takes the baby for a walk every Saturday morning so I can have 2 hours of pure silence. And when he comes back, I'm more present. I still have bad days. Some mornings I wake up in pain and dread the mountain ahead. But there's something different now, a sense that I'm not carrying it all alone. And I've realized something I wish I'd understood sooner. Intimacy isn't just physical. It's emotional safety. It's trust. It's being able to say, I can't today, without fear of disappointing someone. That's what I'm learning to rebuild. A few nights ago, we sat outside after the baby fell asleep. The air was cool, and for once everything was still. He said, "Do you think we'll be okay?" I took a deep breath and said, "I think we already are. We're just healing in slow motion." He smiled at that. Then he reached over and took my hand, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of losing him, not of failing, not of being imperfect. Because the truth is, love isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about seeing the cracks and deciding to stay anyway. We're not the same people we were when we got married. We're more tired, maybe more scarred, but maybe that's okay. Maybe love, real love, is what remains after the ideal fades, the quiet decision to keep showing up, even when it's hard. Sometimes I wonder if other couples go through this too. The quiet unraveling that happens not because of betrayal or anger, but simply because life got too heavy. No one warns you that exhaustion can feel like erosion, slowly wearing down even the strongest bond. When people talk about the hard parts of marriage, they usually mean arguments, finances, infidelity, or big dramatic moments. But for me, the hardest part has been the slow, invisible drift that happens when two people are just trying to survive each day. We never stopped loving each other. We just stopped having room to show it, and realizing that hurt. Because love deserves to be felt, not just known. A few nights ago, after a long, messy day, the kind that starts with spilled milk and ends with tears for no reason, I put our baby to bed and came out to find my husband cleaning up the kitchen. I told him, "You don't have to do that, I'll get it in the morning." He said, "I know. But you'll be tired in the morning." I don't know why, but that made me cry. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge. Because in that moment, I realized that even though we've struggled, even though we've misunderstood each other, even though we've said things we regret, he's still here, helping, caring, trying. And maybe that's what marriage really is. Two imperfect people who keep choosing each other, even when they're both too tired to say it out loud. That night, after I calmed down, I sat with him on the couch. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. I leaned my head on his shoulder and he kissed the top of my head. The silence between us didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like rest. I think a lot about what our love looks like now. It's not grand gestures or passion-filled weekends. It's grocery lists, baby giggles, late-night TV shows, and shared exhaustion. It's small kindnesses, quiet forgiveness, and the understanding that we're both learning as we go. It's knowing that sometimes love isn't loud. It's gentle. I used to believe that love meant giving everything, even when I was empty. But I see now that real love also means protecting yourself enough to have something left to give. It's balance, not sacrifice. It's saying, "I love you, but I also need to rest," and trusting that they'll understand. There was a time I thought I was failing him because I wasn't affectionate enough. Now I see that affection isn't just about touch. It's about care, about showing up, about trying again after the hard days. When I think about our future, I don't imagine perfection. I imagine partnership. I imagine both of us learning to be softer with each other, even when we're stretched thin. I imagine laughter finding its way back into the cracks of our days. I want our child to grow up seeing that love doesn't disappear when life gets hard. It just changes shape. Last weekend, we took a short walk as a family. Nothing fancy, just a stroll through the neighborhood. The baby laughed at every dog we passed, and my husband kept reaching over to hold my hand. It felt simple, easy, and I realized I hadn't felt easy in a long time. When we got home, he said, "I think we're doing okay." I smiled and said, "Yeah, I think we are too. It's not perfect, but it's real." And maybe that's enough. Because when I strip everything else away, the exhaustion, the resentment, the confusion, what remains is love. Not the romantic movie kind, but the kind that gets up every day and tries again, the kind that holds your hand in silence, the kind that forgives. Some nights, I still cry quietly after he's asleep. Not because I'm sad, but because I'm finally starting to let go of the guilt. I'm doing the best I can. We are doing the best we can. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Not sudden joy or perfect balance, but tiny moments of connection in between the chaos. I've started journaling again. Just small entries, 5 minutes at night, nothing fancy. Sometimes I write about the baby's new words. Sometimes about my pain. Sometimes about the little moments with my husband that make me hopeful. It helps me remember that our story is still unfolding, that this chapter of struggle isn't the end, it's just a middle part. The truth is, I don't know what the future holds. But I do know that we're trying. I know that love is still here, even if it looks different now. And maybe one day when the baby's older, when the sleepless nights fade and life settles into something softer, we'll look back at this season and see it for what it really was, a test we survived together. I used to think love was supposed to make life easier. But now I see that sometimes it's the reason you keep going when life gets hard. And maybe that's the most beautiful thing of all.